Dependiendo de desde dónde se conecten el día de
Well,
hoy.
depending on where you are connecting from.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon, buenas noches, good evening. Let me start by reminding you that we have simultaneous interpretation, Spanish, English. In the world icon at the bottom of your screen, you can select the language of your preference. Les recuerdo que contamos con interpretación simultánea inglés, español en el icono del mundo. Ahí pueden seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia. Muchísimas gracias a todas y
Thank you
todos por
very much to all of you for joining us in this webinar, the purpose of which is to present the third edition of the book Registered-Based Statistics, Registers and the National Statistical System by Professors Britt and Anders Wallgren. And as a complement to that, to show you two examples of the implementation of statistical registers through the NSO of Colombia and the National Institute of Census and Statistics from Ecuador. I'm Jose Antonio Mejia, and I will be the moderator of this webinar today. As you know, if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A function, also found in the bottom part of your screen, and if possible, identify yourselves as well as the institution that you belong to and who you are addressing your question to. Today, we are joined by Britt and Anders Wallgren, recognized experts in the use of statistics in the administrative registers, Camilo Mendez from Colombia and Julio Cesar Muñoz from Ecuador. In addition, Susana Cordero Guerras, who is the manager of the Institution for Development Sector of the IDB. And before joining the BID, she presided the IBDG of Brazil. And with this, I now give the floor to Susana to address us, to address her welcoming remarks. Susana, please proceed. Thank you very much, Jose Antonio, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to join you today and welcome. Welcome all. I'm so pleased to be part of this presentation, the presentation of the third edition of the registered-based statistics registers and the National Statistical Systems by Mr. and Mrs. Wallgren. I start by congratulating the authors for this new publication, so significant for the production of statistics throughout the region. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Angela Patricia Vega from Colombia's DANE and David Gain from Ecuador, representatives of institutions that, as Jose Antonio has just indicated, have implemented the use of administrative registers with statistical purposes by creating a statistical register of persons in the respective countries. Thanks to their experiences, we will learn the challenges of lessons learned resulting from the implementation of these registers. And lastly, to welcome each and every person that has joined this webinar, representatives from the NSOs and the national statistical systems, users of microdata, academia, and the public at large. With your presence, you speak to the significance of the production of statistics. The fact that this is the third edition of this book in itself speaks to the significance of this publication, particularly within the statistical producing institutions, particularly the NSOs. This third edition speaks to the process of growth and maturity of this issue. Back in the 60s, the focus was how to promote the use of administrative registers with statistical purposes, aware of its significant potential as a source of data, but also taking the necessary precautions to produce reliable and quality statistics. In its second edition, Anders and Britt take it a step further in the use of registers with statistical purposes, focusing their analysis in issues related to the statistical method to estimate for estimation through registers. And in this third and final edition, they try to provide a more comprehensive and complex situation to be used for statistical purposes by introducing this sphere in the generation of registers and its resulting exploitation of this information. This evolution has been assisted gradually by the NSOs of this region. Some of these milestones translate in the integration of administrative registers in order to produce statistics on migration, gender, labor force, salaries, and remuneration, among other important statistics, either as an official indicator or as a tool for the oversight of official statistics. Registers are also being used in the present wave of Census 2020, the greatest statistical challenge faced by NSOs by promoting substantial information in order to produce cartographies and inventory of addresses. And allow me here a very brief digression in terms of our activity towards the future. Why not to project and works towards consolidating the statistical use of administrative registers, or perhaps everything, so that the next round of census would be based on registers as well? I believe that this is a major challenge aimed at obtaining information in a more timely and efficient manner, and which at the same time will allow to open up to a plethora of issues that are collected through a census. A number of countries from our region have moved forward towards the development of statistical registers, both socio-demographic as well as economic statistics. But I will not explain these in detail because that's part of the content that we will be discussing today. Now, we should ask ourselves, why shouldn't the NSOs continue promoting the use of administrative registers in order to produce statistics, official statistics? An intuitive answer would be to make use of the advantages of such data sources. But allow me first to guide this answer towards another area, which is the possibility to develop the statistical capabilities in the countries. There's consensus on how statistics are mandatory for designing and monitoring public policy. The statistical capacity of countries is very closely related to the possibility of making policy decisions based on evidence, and as well as results-based public actions promoting accountability and transparency. If we want to guide our actions aimed at developing greater statistical capabilities, the NSO should expand their work frontiers and explore new alternatives in order to ensure their role, which is the producers of quality information. This has taken different shapes. Examples of that are expressed through the inclusion of new technologies and techniques, the use of alternative data sources, and the implementation of machine learning techniques and sample surveys in the administrations, geographical administrations, as well as the use of methodologies by developing new statistical operations that will allow to produce data in accordance with the need for information that exists. And of course, the best possible use of administrative registers with statistical purposes. Just as a mere illustration, I'd like to briefly mention some of the advantages that registers have for the production of statistics. They allow to obtain good quality data at a lower cost and efficiently, since the data have been collected previously by other agencies. It reduces the overload of informants by enhancing the quality of the data and providing opportunities to include new dimensions of studies, and also allow to generate statistics with greater geographical subnational disaggregation, providing for a greater coverage. This usually is a frequent limitation when you develop surveys. Beyond the very good aspects of its use, there are certain limitations in its use. In that respect, the NSOs are a key agent in identifying and addressing these limitations, some of which are originally they respond to the need for information of a specific institution. In other words, the data is not established, is not created with statistical purpose. Also, not all countries have a common indicator that will allow to link the information among the different registers that exist. Usually, they only consider formal sectors. They need to be complemented with other statistical operations that will collect data from the non-formal sectors. When they are not updated systematically, these registers can also bring about processes of overcoverage. And lastly, its durability and availability may be subject to political and institutional changes. And having presented this brief balance between the different use of registers for statistical production, I want to insist on the key role played by these statistical registers, particularly in times of big data. They are a very important source of data waiting to be used, but considering its limitations, they provide great variation and volume of information with extraordinary statistical and analytical potential. The use of these registers is fundamental for the work of the state. The NSOs must channel this potential and transform it in order to obtain more and better data. Furthermore, it will be critical the role of the CENs to the extent that a greater coordination and cooperation among the different stakeholders will enable the exchange of registers, bringing about, resulting in a synergy in terms of efficiency between the institutions and the NSOs that come together under the orbit of the CEN, which will allow to make evidence-based decisions, and it will avoid to provide the same information repeatedly. From the IADB, we continue to be committed to leveraging the use of administrative registers in official statistics of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the inclusion of big data and machine learning and analytics in this process. As an example, we have extensively supported this issue from the translation to Spanish of the first edition of the book of by the authors Wallgren and its later publication by Mexico's NSOs to a number of in-person visits by Britt and Anders to at least a dozen countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. We've also created work groups, specialized work groups involving the use of registers, such as the workshop of geographical addresses formed by NSOs and other spatial data infrastructure organizations from the region where specific lessons were learned, as well as future challenges. We've also promoted the dissemination of knowledge as a result of using registers through online courses in order to make better use of the statistical data provided by these registers. And with no further ado, I leave you in the company of our presenters to share with us their very valuable contributions. And I wish you a very fruitful meeting. And I welcome this book. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to be here with us. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Susana, for your kind remarks. Before I give the floor to our panelists, I'd like to add that this work relation that Susana had made reference to between Latin America and the Caribbean and Professors Wallgren and Britt and Professors Wallgren dates back to over 10 years, started when Eric Rodriguez, a colleague in INEGI, came to the office, brought to the office the first edition of the Wallgren's book. And he said that it would be great to organize a course on the book and to have the book in Spanish. At the time, back then, I remember that I knew a Swedish statistician that had also worked in the NSO of that country. We contacted him, and he linked us to the Wallgrens, who very kindly accepted to travel to Mexico to teach a course on their book and to make the necessary arrangements for this book to be translated in Spanish. Both the course as well as the translation of the book became a reality thanks to support from the IADB. INECI printed the book in Spanish, of which 3,000 copies were printed, distributed throughout the NSOs. from all of Latin America. And ever since Britt and Anderson have organized technical courses and technical support in over a dozen Latin American and Caribbean countries, we are here today to listen to their presentation based on the third edition of their book, a book that I left at home. So I only have here the cover to show you, which reflects their experience, not only throughout the many years working in the NSO of Sweden and their experience throughout other regions in the world, but most particularly they focus on their experience working in Latin America and the Caribbean. So,
Britt and Anders, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Professor Wallgren, please go ahead. You have the floor, sir, but your mic is muted. You have to open your mic. Your microphone is muted right now. It shows that it's muted. This is the interpreter talking, that your microphone is muted.
No, Anders, we cannot hear you.
Excuse me, Mr. Wallgren, could you open your mic, please?
Now,
There you go, yeah. Now you can
Buenos
use the screen
dias.
also. Thank you.
So, thank you for the invitation to this webinar. It is very fine to meet colleagues from Latin America and the Caribbean again. Now we have a PowerPoint slide, and we will share screen like this. Here we have the screen. So, yes, this third edition was published last year, and it is based on our experience from traveling in Latin America. You can see our background. We started as university teachers. Then we were working at Statistics Sweden for about 20 years. And then from 2011 on, we have been working quite a lot in Latin America and the Caribbean. So, register-based statistics, how did it start? Well, during the 1960s, public administration in the Nordic countries started to replace paper-based administration and paper-based registers with computer-based systems. And 1967, Svein Nordbotten at Statistics Sweden, he developed new ideas on statistical information systems and explained that administrative sources should be used for statistical purposes. These were new ideas, and it was discussed by top managers, the top managers at the Nordic statistical offices, and gradually they developed a long-term strategy to develop Nordic statistical systems so that administrative data could be used. And here, Nordbotten introduced new aspects of statistical methods. He introduced statistical information systems, and that is something quite different from the concept statistical survey. And then also he introduced statistical file systems, or what we now call register systems. And the Nordic countries had a long-term plan to replace the census with the statistical registers. And this plan was realized step by step. And finally, these countries could replace the traditional census with a system consisting of statistical registers. Here you can see Statistics Denmark. They started 1968, and then they created a long range of registers up to up to 1979, and then 1981 they could produce the first register-based census. And the Statistics Denmark, they were very happy for a while, but the reaction among colleagues in Europe was quite surprising for them, because Eurostat did not like this approach at all. Eurostat at that time said that a register-based census is a rudimentary tool for grappling with the increasing complexity of modern society. So they said it was bad, and they did not like at all. So that was Eurostat's conclusion regarding Statistics Denmark register-based census. But then time went on, and non-response rates in the sample surveys increased. And when countries in Europe had the traditional censuses, there were often problems in public opinion, that people got angry regarding this census, and they did not like that at all. So there were increasing problems with sample surveys and also with the traditional census. So then 1997, Eurostat had changed their opinion. Now they were in favor of this to use administrative registers for statistics production. And they arranged a seminar with all countries in the Union, and this was discussed. And after this seminar, these new methods and new kinds of sources were accepted. But still we find that there are statisticians that do not accept administrative sources. There was a discussion in the Statistical Journal of the International Association for Official Statistics during 222, and MacDonald said that a register-based census, administrative data, cannot be a scientific basis of the census. And we commented on his paper, and we said that what is important, that are costs and quality, and depending on these two, cost and quality, you should choose the best method that suits your country best. And you will find that discussion if you use these links to the homepage of this AOS journal. So if you look at the Nordic countries, you can see that we have many statistical registers on persons. They are created by different teams. They use different sources and are produced at different points in time. And the methods that are used make these registers completely consistent regarding to populations and variables. And these register-based census can be used for both official statistics and research. And the register system is not just a set of registers. The system also has methodological implications regarding how it should be designed, coordinated, and used. This was made clear in Statistics Denmark's book from 1995, and also in our books on register-based statistics. And it should be noted here that it is not only the traditional census that was replaced, but also all sample surveys in the National Statistical Systems were changed. And there were developed new survey methods that always include the use of registers. And here we have a chart of this register system. Actually, it is not only the system of registers we have in the Nordic countries. Here you can also include the sample surveys both to enterprises and to persons, because these sample surveys are today also based on registers in our register systems. The population register is used for all sample surveys of persons and households, and the business register is used in all sample surveys regarding enterprises. And you can see here a statistical table from the register-based census for one small municipality in Sweden. It is only about 7,000 persons here. But still you can see detailed statistics for this municipality can be produced with this register-based census. And you have here 4 registers, the population register, we have here, and then we have the employment, income register, and education register. You will find them here. Now, how were we able to produce this kind of statistics? And then now we have an important issue that is about the preconditions for register-based statistics. We have found when we traveled through Latin America and the Caribbean that the preconditions are sometimes not so good in these countries. And that differs from the Nordic countries. We had good preconditions from the beginning. So when we started to work with the registers, we already had good preconditions. We had the legal base for our work, so we could get access to administrative data. We had good systems for national identity codes that were used in all of these administrative sources. And with these identity numbers, we can link data for official statistics and research. And also, we had quite a lot of administrative systems that were produced reliable data. And also, we have a good traditional cooperation in our countries. So it was easy to establish working groups with people from Statistics Sweden and from other ministries like that to solve common problems. And this is different in many Latin American countries. And in this 3rd edition, we have tried to concentrate on the problems that new register countries will face when they try to use administrative registers for statistics production. They must work with improving the legal base. They must work to develop national identity numbers. And in many cases, they have to improve the administrative systems. Actually, that we also had to do in the Nordic countries. We found that our administrative systems were not sufficient. So then we modified these administrative systems. And to do that, we had to get support from politicians, and changed legislation so that these administrative systems were improved. If we turn to what we teach at the universities, we teach sample survey design, and that deals with one survey. And what we discuss is how can we reduce sampling errors. This is what we call sample survey design. And we discuss stratification, inclusion, probabilities, auxiliary variables like that. And we express the methods with mathematical formulas, for instance, in Cochrane's classical book. But when we turn to register-based statistics, then it is not only one register we design, because when we change preconditions, it is not only one register that is affected. It can be a large number of registers that are improved. I mean, when we improve the legal base, then all administrative data will be improved. When we developed unified systems of identity codes, and it is not only one register that benefits, it's the whole production system in the country that becomes improved. And when we improve administrative systems, as one administrative system can be used by many registers, also again, a number of registers are improved. And also, you must develop relations with administrative authorities and establish cooperation. So these four issues are very important for the quality of the administrative data and for the efficiency of the National Statistical System. So what we will point out in the third edition, that is, you must work with these four preconditions and improve them. So we go back to this model of the National Statistical System in the Nordic countries. You can see here we have four gray circles. They are the base registers in the system. And when we do sample surveys, we use these base registers. Actually, all registers and all surveys in this upper left corner build on the population register, and the link between the sample survey and the different registers are the person's identity numbers. And here you have another base register, the business register, and all economic business registers can be linked to that one. And now we have links, so we can link all registers in the system. We can link with any other register in the system. We can take education register and link here and go to the business register and see what kind of education do the persons who work in this company have, like that. So we can combine, because we must combine to get all the variables we need in the register survey. And then also we can combine. That means that the data can be used efficiently. And we have education as a very good example. Education is only handled by the team responsible for the education register. I mean, education, we have quite a lot of complicated classification variables to distinguish with different kinds of education. And they are experts on these classifications. And also they have the responsibility to manage the education register. And then no other surveys and no other registers in Sweden will have to bother with the education variable. When they need it, they go to the education register and import it into their sample survey or into their statistical register when they need it. So in this way, we have a specialization of this team handles the education register and the education variable, and all other staff working at Statistics Sweden can use the results of their work. So this means that data is used very efficiently. And then we have a third reason why we should compare registers, and that is to find errors and correct errors. I will show you that later. I mean, when we combine different registers, we always find coverage problems. And to see these problems, we must do the linkage to have the errors becoming real. So, and you see here, we have 4 parts of the system. We have also activity register with job and study activities. And we have the geographical dimension here, real estate and buildings and dwellings in that corner. And so, what is an administrative register? We want in this 3rd edition to stress that to understand your administrative registers, you must understand the system that has created this data. So you have to understand the administrative system, and when you have problems, you perhaps must improve the administrative system. So an administrative register aims to include all the objects in a defined group of objects.
No.
So, and I mean, we can take value-added tax administration. Then we have one administrative object set consists of big companies that have to report every month. So that is not a statistical business register. It is a typical example of an administrative object set.
Yeah.
And when they administrate objects, they always use the object's identity numbers.
Ja, det är det.
Det är du som heter det. So, and as we have the identities, we can update and expand the register with new variable values for each object. So, generation of new data, complete listing, and known identities. These are the characteristics of an administrative register. And then we have statistical registers. And that is something slightly different. These registers have been created by statisticians who use available administrative and statistical registers. When they have created that statistical register, then the statistical register is not updated anymore. It is a final version that is used for the production of statistics. But also here, complete listing and identities are also characteristics of statistical registers. We have the term register survey, And that is exactly the same as we create a specific statistical register. We have a specific purpose for the register we want to develop, and we publish a specific kind of statistics based on that statistical register. And here in the administrative registers, we have administrative object sets. And then in the statistical registers, we have statistical populations. For instance, value-added tax. We have 3 administrative registers, small companies that report value-added tax once every year. We have medium-sized companies in Sweden, they report quarterly. And then we have a third administrative object set with big companies that report monthly. Here we have 3 different administrative object sets. When we combine these, we get a statistical population of all kinds of enterprises that have to pay value-added tax. And also in the administrative registers, we have administrative object types. We have to change them into statistical units. And that is about households. We create what we need in the statistical register. In the administrative registers, we have other concepts. And above all, we have administrative variables in the administrative register, and from this we create statistical variables in the statistical register. So we do not use administrative data as they are. We do quite a lot of processing of these administrative data to get a statistical registers with a kind of populations and variables we need for our register survey. And here we have a very good example of a statistical register, our income register, and it is based on actually about 40 sources, both external sources delivered to Statistics Sweden, administrative registers, and also internal sources. They can use already existing registers at Statistics Sweden. And here they can create new populations for the statistical purpose, and they can create new derived variables based on the administrative variables, and also create households with the help of the information in the population register. So that was basic concepts. Now let us assume that we are in a country in Latin America. We want to start to use producing statistics with administrative data. And your starting point can be that you have a decentralized statistical system in the country. You have no cooperation and you have no data sharings. And ministries and national institutes, they think that data on persons and business data, they are so confidential, so they cannot be given to the National Statistical Office. And also now we want to develop the National Statistical System. And here the National Statistical Office should have the leading role in this work. And a practical problem is to get access to microdata from to the National Statistical Office. And then you must explain to all other actors that the National Statistical Office will use administrative registers in a way that protects confidentiality. And here you have quite a lot of delicate work to do. And you must also develop an IT system where names are taken away and real identity numbers are replaced by anonymous identity numbers. And only these anonymous identity numbers will be used in the production of statistics. And this you must explain to the ministries and national institutes that have all these administrative data you want. Here you have one example. This can be an administrative register. That is unprocessed data, what you get in your input database. And here you have the official identity numbers should be taken away. Names, addresses in text should be taken away. And the name of the employers should be taken away. And job titles like that. All this information in text and all this with identity numbers should be processed, and all delicate information should be taken away. And after processing, it can look like this. Instead of the official identity number, you have here the anonymous numbers. Instead of name, you don't need when you have identity numbers. Instead of address, it is sufficient to give geographical codes for the municipality where the person lives. And also you should replace the employer's identities. So you have anonymous business identity numbers and anonymous establishment identity numbers. So after processing, the data looks like this. And then now there should be no problems with confidentiality here. And this must be explained to your colleagues in the ministries and the national authorities that have the official data you want. And the link between the official number and the anonymous identity number should only exist at one place in the country. And the decision to use anonymous identity numbers should be taken early, before you have created many statistical registers, because then you will have hundreds of data files with official identity numbers that will be difficult to correct all these data files. So the best thing is to make this decision in the beginning of the process, and then you don't have to make corrections afterwards. Yes, and then you must have strict routines. I mean, names and addresses are necessary when you send out interviewers to collect data. And then you should only use anonymous numbers here. And they take a sample from the population register, and the list of anonymous identity numbers for the sample are sent to the population register. And here you get names and addresses for the sample, and that is delivered back. But again, there are only anonymous identity numbers there. So this is an important issue. Must we restrict the use of administrative data and identity numbers to protect confidentiality? Let us take a National Statistical Office that use anonymous identity numbers here as an example. And then we have administrative registers are delivered here to the National Statistical Office. Here you have input database with real identities. But here we process the data so that in the databases here we have only anonymous identity numbers. And also here we have all statistical sample surveys and register surveys producing detailed data. Also here we can have problems that you can identify persons in these detailed tables. So we could have problems with the confidentiality in the production system at the National Statistical Office. But where do we have the risks regarding protection of confidentiality? And we think, if you take Statistics Sweden as an example, here we have administrative data at the ministries. And here we have all the clerks working in this ministry. They have access to administrative data with names, addresses, and real identity numbers. So we think that here we have the most serious problem with protecting confidentiality we have here. If we go to Statistics Sweden, here we have some risk with the protection of confidentiality. But if we look at Statistics Sweden's production system and output, we think that here we have small risks. We sometimes read in Swedish newspapers that some nurses have been found. They have read information about patients without reasons. And some police officers have also read information on persons without reasons. So here we have some real problems. So that was the first obstacle to get access to data. And the second one is how to take care of dirty data. Then we have one chapter about quality assessment, and we have another quality of improving the quality by editing. And then we have the third option, don't waste time on very dirty data, improve the administrative systems instead. And here we have a case study from Peru. They had an old system with very dirty data. They had handwriting based. They have different kinds of systems taking care of data. They have different codes for classification. And here, the statistical office in Peru could create a much better system that did not produce bad quality data.
Nej, jag kommer för långt där, va?
So if here we have that production system in detail, but I think I will continue. Here we have the place where real identity numbers are replaced by anonymous numbers. It is in this database. We have both the official identity number, but also the anonymous numbers. And here the exchange is done. And in this throughput database, we don't have the real identity numbers, we have only anonymous numbers. And you have to do much more processing also. I would like to come on to this slide. We have found there are quite a lot of registers in the countries we have visited, but no one are good, no good registers, and then what to do? And here we have 7 institutions in this country. 2 institutions work with population registers, and 4 institutions work with, this number of 5 institutions work with demographic events. But names, sex, birth date, birthplace, and home address, these variables are in all these registers. And if you look at these registers, you have old variables, spelling errors, and errors in registration that will occur. So here it is important. These 7 institutions should instead work together. And then these errors and inconsistencies will be reduced. So this is an example of a situation in Latin America. We have a number of ministries and national institutes. They work without cooperation. They don't exchange microdata. They do double work. They get inconsistencies and coverage problems in their registers. Here, each one creates their own register. And at the end here, we have the National Statistical Office doing a census. If you look at the Nordic countries, the same chart will look like this. The Registro Civil, that is the only authority in the country that creates a population register, administrative population register. And then all other ministries and institutions use that population register, and then they can add their own variables. And here also, when these registers are used and they contact Registro Civil with the real population register, if errors are found, corrections are done here, and then automatically the same correction will be done at all other places in the country that use this population register. So, if we finally start to see how did the register-based census, how did we develop that? And if you go to the census, where are the basic questions? It is, where do people live, and with whom do they live, and where do they work? I mean, these basic facts are important in the census. And here, georeferencing of persons, we need the population register that is linked to the geographical dimension. If we want the regional labor market, we must be able to georeference jobs to the statistical map that is kept here. So to georeferencing of persons and jobs are important. And at Statistics Sweden, this is the system we had during this period of time. And we could produce regional population statistics, but we could not produce register-based household statistics, and also regional employment statistics were impossible. 1985, we got activity register with all job activities, and then we could link persons with the employer and get also information on where each person works. And this required support from politicians and new legislation so that each employer must give information on where each employee was working. You have to give the establishment for each person. And also the education register was created here, and that you should remember, the education register, to start that register, you should use a census to get the education on for the entire population. Otherwise, after that, you'll only get data from school children and university students. But for older persons, you will not have any source with level of education. And then our final step here, 2011, then we could create a dwelling register, and now we could see possible to produce register-based household statistics. Ligger långt efter. So, you see that record linkage is very important when you have a statistical system of this kind. And most record linkage that is discussed in the literature, that is about persons, and we link identical objects. Persons in one register are linked with persons in another register. But in the Nordic countries, we do more kinds of record linkage. We can link children with parents, employees with employers, and more. And why is record linkage so important? To get good coverage, to get rich variable content, but also to find quality problems. Here we have linked 3 registers: business register, annual pay register, and quarterly pay registers. And then you see here in the top, we have under coverage in the business register. This company exists in the administrative data, but not in the business register. Here we have over coverage, a company that exists in the business register, but not in the administrative sources. And then when you compare here administrative data from different sources, you will find almost the same variable values, but sometimes it differs. And then you can check a small number of companies like this. And sometimes you find huge differences, 627 instead of 168,000 million Swedish kronor. So here we have found a serious problem in Statistics Sweden's statistical work. And also you see the last 2 lines. We find 2 enterprises that merge. Then administrative data will look a bit peculiar, and that you must notice, you must find these cases and find good actions to improve the statistical database. So when it comes to record linkage, we have deterministic record linkage, and then we have the probabilistic record linkage. And in the Nordic countries, I think we should say that we have the most advanced form of record linkage. We call it the register system approach to record linkage. And that is first step, we develop administrative systems based on national identity numbers of good quality. This will require some hard work, but it is a one-time effort. When we have done that, then we use deterministic record linkage. And this is what we recommend, that countries that are new regarding register-based statistics, that it should use this approach. And we have found from a non-Nordic country, there are researchers that want to combine data from social statistics registers with health register data from hospitals. And then, of course, social statistics registers, they have one kind of identity numbers, and the hospital registers, they have their own system of identity numbers. So these researchers had to spend quite a lot of work with working with probabilistic record linkers to combine these two kinds of sources, but instead, the hospitals should use social security numbers, and then it will be easy to use deterministic record linkage for their purposes. I think I will go to the end because you have a good example. I go back to what Eurostat said many years ago. A register-based census is a very bad tool for grappling with the increasing complexity of modern society. And here you see our monthly population census for Sweden. And here we have data for 2 Swedish small municipalities. And you find quite important data regarding the demography in these 2 municipalities. We have 1 stagnating municipality and 1 expanding, and this is important information. I mean, what we see here, the population register follows the entire population all time. A census gives only a few snapshots, 1 week every 10th year. And this kind of data, you cannot do it with a traditional census. You will only get these black dots. You cannot do it with a sample survey because here it is 2 small groups of persons. You cannot produce sample survey statistics for so small areas. So here, a register-based census is the only method that can give us important statistics here. So, thank you. I've stopped there.
Thank you very much, Anders and Britt. Muchas gracias, Anders y Britt, por la presentación realizada.
Thank you, Anders and Britt, for the presentation. Undoubtedly, the contributions of this publication will be of a great help for those who work in statistics and obviously for those who advance towards a more intense use of statistics registries. As he said, to know the advancement of preconditions is the key for a country to develop a strategy to build statistics registries based on administrative registries and records. And this strategy of the design of the strategy will depend on the level of development of the base administrative registries and the level of access that exists with those registries. As I commented at the beginning, Britt and Anderson have worked in the region, sharing their knowledge generously. And all the students, the best students have been Colombia and Ecuador. So to complement Britt and Anders' presentation, I asked Camilo Mendes to take the floor responsible for international affairs of DANE of Colombia to tell us about what they are doing regarding administrative registers and statistics. Thank you, Jose Antonio. Thank you also, Mr. and Mrs. Wallgren, for the presentation. And thank you for giving me the floor to share a bit. How do we go from theory into practice, the latest developments that we've had in Colombia in the latest years? I wouldn't want to begin without first expressing my thanks, my appreciation, not only to Susana for her welcoming words, but the role of the Inter-American Development Bank in this process that DANE has moved forward in the last few years, where we can see how the bank becomes an articulator and manager of knowledge. As Jose Antonio commented at the beginning, it is quite clear. So I'm uploading the presentation and I proceed. I must underscore that, as mentioned at the beginning, all these developments that we will present from Colombia have been supported with support. They are not our own creation. It doesn't come out of spontaneity. It uses technical support that the Colombian National Statistics Office received from Mr. and Mrs. Wallgren for many years. And particularly, it is important to underscore the role of the COVID-19 pandemic role to force the different statistics office of the region to finally bet on innovation and take advantage of the different administrative records and registries that was facilitated thanks to the establishment of a series of experimental statistics frameworks that allowed to publish information with shorter temporality, more relevance to supply or meet the different needs that decision makers had. For this, I will not stop at this, but we must take as reference also the role of INEGI in this process, in this past registries book that was accepted by the Andean countries, Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, through a technical cooperation agreement, financed also by the Inter-American Bank. We're able to move forward in understanding how to take advantage of these registries to elaborate official statistics. Amongst the main results that we have from this project, we have the establishment of some basis for elaboration of synthesis of regional diagnostic, as well as learning what were the lessons learned or the different use cases developed by the Andean community countries that allowed consolidation of a series of inputs to formulate a methodological conceptual framework adapted to the condition of the Andean sub-region. This is quite specific if we consider what Mr. Wallgren mentioned in his presentation with elements like legislation, where Latin American countries differ a bit from the traditional approximation of Nordic countries. Likewise, one of the important results was the importance of creating the basis for the National Statistics Office of the region to start using registries to do census based on registries. So this is a bit of context. From DANE perspective, maybe the greatest leap forward has been the constitution and launching of the population-based statistics registry, the REBP, for its letters in Spanish, taking into account and considering the developments of Mr. Wallgren and Scandinavian countries regarding administration of administrative statistics records. At this point, we have a bit of context where we find how these registries incorporate people information, registries managed by different public agencies, government agencies of the Colombian government. This is something that must be underscored as a difference existing between the Nordic model and Latin American countries, where we see that these countries develop broader well-being frameworks, much greater than the benefits established by governments of Latin America. Again, in reference to COVID, commonly where the governments of the region, and particularly the government of Colombia, started to establish monetary transfers directly, which generated not only a new registry to report the constitution of statistics based on registries, but also an incentive for institutions that could advance in these coordination and collaboration schematics, allowing transmission of this information to the National Statistics Office, following the protocols and processes established in reference to confidentiality and management of safety and security in the handling of the information. In this respect, you can see in this slide the sources of information that are part of our statistics registration or records. The largest of this might be the Persons Identification Archive managed by the Office of the Civil State. That is approximately 95% of all the data that are part of this. But we also have other registries of great importance, such as the Health Registry, the single database of all those affiliated to health services, and also education registries, vital statistics produced by DANE, the contributions to Social Security, or PILA, contributions to Social Security managed by the Ministry of Health, and some others. Here, particularly, I would like to refer to how there are different types of registries regarding information managed, the institutions who is the custodian of these registries with different attitudes, and the will to share. In the case of Colombia, we can see how particularly we have the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the National Declaration Departments, who are allies of the National Statistics Office, with which we have worked in specific frameworks, such as the Intersectorial Vital Statistics Commission. And there is an interrelationship of trust that already exists, but we also have some allies, like in the case of the National Customs and Tax Administration, that also have significant lack of trust and do not like to share data. And this is understandable to a certain extent if we consider the information that they have. However, after a process of more than 5 years and based on different experiences and some specific innovations that were generated in collaboration with other institutions in November of last year, we were able to subscribe finally an interinstitutional agreement that allowed transmission of this data and sharing of this data. Likewise, as part of the Colombian context, we must also mention that although the statistics law foresees and mandates different institutions of the government sector to share their administrative registries, I believe that it is a characteristic of the region. And the theory in the law sometimes does not become practice in the field. In this aspect, I must mention also that within this population-based registry statistics, we have the data of the household survey, which is a monthly survey undertaken by the National Statistical Administration Department following the guidelines presented previously. Series of processes have been created for integration and confirmation of this statistics registry, facilitating analysis and clearance of these registries and revision to be shared with the entity. Here you can see the statistics template of these registries, including the variables, what are statistics of missing data, inconsistencies, and duplicity. In the case of statistics registry and population, we have 4 categories of variables where we can find identification, the document number, the name, and the date of birth, and the sex, and demographic, location, and registration variables. Now we can see how was it done, and how we have done building that population registry and comparing it with the national household census at the department level. As you can see in this map, you can see how there are specific region. For example, in the center of the map, in this blue that you see here is Bogota, the capital city. We see a greater correspondence between the statistics registry and the national census. This is also related to the management capacity of these registries that the Colombia capital, Bogota, has in comparison to other departments. To the left, we have El Chocó department, or to the right, we have next to Venezuela, the Pichá department or province, where there is a lesser correlationship, although having good aggregated value results at the department level. This changes in the municipal level. And let's look at this case where we had before the city of Bogota, because here we start to see how there is a situation of supra and over enumeration regarding the handling of the registry of the database of those affiliated to health services, the Ministry of Health, where we see the dynamic where people that live in the area next to Bogota go to the city to receive different health services. That is a process through which we have been working on with the purpose of improving coverage and quality of administrative health registries at different levels, at the municipal level and province level. But because of the map that we have in the slide, you can see it is evident how in the zones further away or next to the border in the south of the country, it's very difficult, particularly because of the concentration of population in these territories. At this time, as you can see, we have a comparison done between the national census and the population registry, as well as the quality of life survey, where we can see the differences that we can identify at the department level. So to proceed, it is important to mention how in the framework of the pandemic, it was possible to produce some specific indicators.
And we underscore here the experience with how we calculated the monetary poverty figures of 2021 based on these administrative registers as well as other similar exercises. But as I was saying for DANE, it will be a priority now to go from the production of register-based specific administrative data to a national registry system based on this data. It is not only important to make progress in terms of the different methodologies and enhancing the quality and strengthening the registers, but also in a number of configurations and transformations, institutional transformations, thanks to a collaboration that exists between the IADB and the NSO of Korea. The NIA has received a number of training courses that has led us to the need of establishing a technical directorate within its organizational structure that will be responsible for managing administrative registers with the other members of the CEN related to a system within the institution that would facilitate the use of these registers and will reduce the burden that the different sources experience. Why? Because presently the requests to organize the national population register or the base register of corporations is done via email, which takes a long time of the employee. So we have to maximize efficiency in this process. Similarly, it is also important to underscore the fact that just as we've reached some major accomplishments in recent years, it will be equally important to move forward something mentioned by Susana, which are two very specific issues. Number one, the construction of a business model, a business case, in order to be able to take the necessary institutional and budgetary related measures that would make it easier to transfer the data among different institutions, government institutions, by particularly presenting cases such as the Danish case or the Korean case, where with the purpose of carrying out the population census, instead of requesting large amounts of resources from the Ministry of Finance, it is much more efficient to do it thanks to registers. And although this takes a very long course, presently Colombia expects to use its registers in order to conduct its counting of its population, which is scheduled for 2025. Another suggestion posed by Susana is the creation of these national statistics, a census. So if we can have some certain specific registers available, we must establish these linkages that will allow for better use of this data in order to make more visible what could be what could be gender-related issues, particularly making the LGBTQI population visible. In Colombia, for your knowledge, until recently, we started including this subcategory under the sex variable, which will facilitate the integration and data production that will allow to make visible the situation, the status of this community in our country. So, thank you very much for the space. Thank you, Jose Antonio. Thank you, Professors Wallgren, for your presentation. And Jose Antonio, I give the floor back to you. Camilo, thank you very much for your presentation. And now, to continue, I now ask Julio Cesar Muñoz, who is the coordinator of statistics production in INEC-Ecuador, to share with us their experience. Julio, you have the floor. Thank you. Hello, Jose Antonio. It's a great pleasure to say hello to everybody, as well as a very warm welcome to Professors Wallgren. As has been stated, you've been the cornerstone, your book, and dating back to the first edition, the second one, and now we're very happy to see that you've already reached a third edition. The work aimed at developing administrative registers in Ecuador and the statistical population-based register. It's equally important to express our gratitude for the support that we have received for a very long time from the IADB in this collaboration to understand how essential it is for the NSO to move towards a more sustainable official statistics, and along the way, it is the administrative registers that are the cornerstone for this. So we've prepared this short presentation of what is our status in terms of these administrative registers in Ecuador. And as you will see, all throughout this experience that has been shared by Professors Wallgren in the 3 visits to our country, 2014, 2015, and 2016. This is what has enabled us to, number one, to generate the necessary human capital, followed by a technological infrastructure and technological resources that have resulted in a number of success stories that we will be presenting to you. So the first step is to start describing what is the use of these administrative registers. And as Professor Wallgren indicated in very clear, very concise explanations of this third edition of their book, it is essential to be able to have this logic of transferring from an administrative register to a statistical register. And amidst all this, we have the statistical processing, which these different steps that we, the NSOs, must follow in order to transform this administrative data into data that will be useful for statistical purposes, that will meet the best quality data standards, which is essential for an NSO. In this case, is to work together with the sources that produce administrative data. In the case of Ecuador, the Ministry of Public Health, the Social Security Institution, the Civil Registry, the Ministry of Government, and many other institutions with which we work on a daily basis in order to continue strengthening this national administrative register system. Based on what Professors Wallgren have conveyed to us all throughout these years, we have these 3 pillars in our administrative registers: the protection of personal data, methodological registers, and the technology. Thanks to this, we have worked in the development of these 4 base registers: the population register, the real estate register, the employment or job register, and the corporate or the register of businesses. And this results in the 2 major operations, statistical operations in Ecuador, that have produced these registers that is available to the international community and to Ecuadorians. The integration of the population register to the real estate register is the base register of population, the census based on administrative registers, and obviously the employment and the register, and the register of corporations is what we in Ecuador have named as of 2014, thanks to the support and assistance of a number of institutions, Professors Wallgren, IADB, CoreStar, the ECLAC, and many other institutions that have assisted us in our work, is the Labor and Entrepreneurial Dynamics Lab. In this respect, we want to focus on the population-based statistical register, which is the register that we've produced in recent years, and we are very happy to be able to have achieved results from this one. In this respect, this base population register, as explained by Camilo, in the case of Colombia, which includes the most important characteristics of identification that the people who reside within our territory have. So we have wanted to create this stock in record time, and this stock is formed by three most important bases in Ecuador. The first one is a civil registry, the people who have a identification card. The two is the population and housing census. And lastly, the issue of Social Security through the affiliates. All of this is done through single codes with a very high standards to protect the personal data. Obviously, to this stock, we have to assign it a characterization that comes from other administrative sources, and we do it through the linkage that allows us to provide identification, demographic, and geographical characterizations. In this respect, in order to update this stock of this population, we have two major issues: the exits through that we obtain through the register of death certificates, migration registers, and other such registers. And for the inputs, we have the births and the entry into the country. And of course, these first ones, the people who leave, who exit, are qualified as inactive, and everything that pertains to this situation. And we add the entry into the stock as a result of births or immigration. And this is what allows us to have this counting of the population in a specific moment in time. What have we done? And this is essential. We are working towards the sustainability of the official statistics, and I must express my greatest appreciation to Professor Wallgren for the support that we've received from them as of 2014. In 2013, Ecuador created an institutionality of administrative resources, the Directorate for Administrative Resources, that manages this methodological environment in order that it allows us to build this national administrative register system. Early on, it is essential to have the regulatory framework to support this national system. The statistical law of 1996, the Code of Innovation of Organic Laws dating to the 2016, the Organic Law to Protect the Personal Data of 2021, which is an essential component for working with administrative registers in Ecuador, and the Executive Decree or Presidential Decree 77 of 2013 that provides us with greater competencies, authority to work in this area. Then the methodological component, we have worked very closely with international support that refers to evaluate the quality of the registers. One of the cornerstones mentioned by Professors Walden to know what is the quality of these registers. We have the strengthening of administrative results, the transformation of these registers towards a statistical register, and the statistical register, population-based statistical record. In terms of the technology, which is another leg of this major effort, we have all safe scenarios for data transfer. And in Ecuador, there's an institutional process to be able to transfer to a national directorate of public data that authorizes the different institutions to transfer data among themselves. And we have all the appropriate IT channels in order to provide for the transfer of this data. We have an environment for the processing of massive data and automation of certain processes to transform these administrative registers. That includes 9 key steps from reading the accuracy of data, avoid duplication in order to determine the quality of that data, of that information. Obviously, as Susana also made reference to it, we are working in an environment to be able to analyze and make visible the information. And also we are focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning, not only for the production of administrative registers, but also for the production of statistics in general. We are moving towards a digital transformation of what is the National Statistical Institute of Ecuador. These technological progress is essential, and we in our NSO, we cannot lag behind. So the essence of all of this is the work based on these administrative registers. We have presented certain success stories, which we believe are important to mention. The number one is the census of Galapagos in 2015, where we integrated for the first time these administrative registers, the experimental census of 2019, the business lab, which integrates information from the Ecuadorian tax office, as well as information from the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Economy and Finances, as well as the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security, where we have all the affiliation of all Ecuadorians. So we have created this laboratory that includes a number of statistical operations that are disaggregated, or the first of which is the one that we call the Directory of Enterprises, which is reviewed on an annual basis to determine the sales dynamics of these companies, both large as well as medium and small. The statistical register of jobs in the social security based on formal employment in Ecuador, and we publish this regularly every quarter. And this allows us to determine the exactness of the information, comparing that to the national survey of employment and underemployment that we produce. And lastly, the population-based register that we have already completed, and the initial results as of June 2022. And right now, the census in Ecuador 2022 that integrates fundamental elements in order to continue strengthening the National Statistical System, namely having a single identifier that will allow us to proceed with the integration, but based on 3 legs: that the data is encrypted, that the data can be pseudo-anonymized, or depersonalize the data, as we call it in Ecuador, that these identification codes are transformed into statistical identification codes. And lastly, when we present the data about our citizens, that they are completely anonymous in order to ensure the confidentiality, to guarantee confidentiality, which is one of the fundamental principles of the statistical registers. In this respect, we have to review the life cycle of the base population register that involves 7 steps or 7 fundamental elements. The first of which is planning and developing this base population register, followed by the transfer, and all this administrative process that goes through a regulatory process, that goes through a methodological and technological aspects, and how do we collect all these sources of data from the civil registry, from the Ecuadorian Social Security Institute, and others from which we receive regular periodic transfers, some of which take place on a weekly or on a monthly basis. And the team, and here I have to thank our team, administrative registers, led by David Cain, who is our methodologists, the population-based register. We've been working on this for years now, and it is essential the support that the international community has provided us in order to be able to develop this national administrative registers system, followed by the transformation that I've explained extensively in my presentation, the integration and construction of the base population register, the publication, which is essential that we make publish, follow the standards of protecting personal data and making them anonymous, the assessment and adjustments, which bring us back to square one, to the first step and a new cycle. This is a first result that we've obtained from the population-based register. On the left-hand side of the slide, you can see the base population register that provides us data on active population, approximately 19 million. Of course, we have an assumption here. On the right-hand side, we have the updating as of 2023 of how we are projecting the population. I must also express our gratitude to CELADE for all the assistance they provided us based on the administrative registers and how we projected the population, which indicates that we will be approximately 18 million. So the actual difference that we have between the base population register and our projection results from the fact as a result of the migration inflows. And these are the areas that we have to continue strengthening the registers about migration flows in order to have a better clearance, to be able to proceed with a better clearance of the population-based register. So if we can contribute to this discussion with anything, is what do we need to update the base population register of the countries? It is essential that we have the appropriate data. We have to continue working in terms of the international migration movements, which has been established legally in the country, the appropriate methodology to adapt the base population registers, demographic studies that can be done based on this base population register and overall infrastructure. We maintain a plan aimed at strengthening our work for the next 5 years in order to strengthen the infrastructure and the statistical production based on administrative registers. And this is something that has been funded appropriately thanks to an operation with the World Bank. And this is what allows us to say that Ecuador will move forward to provide sustainability to its official statistics by strengthening the production of this data based on administrative registers. And lastly, last but not least, we are aware of this. We need to continue building the capacities of our human capital. We need more data engineers and demographers that make all of this possible. In this respect, and cross-cutting to all of this, is the protection of personal data, which is part of our mandate to guarantee, to ensure the data of the Ecuadorians, starting with a mandate that this statistical office has. In order to continue moving towards this world of administrative registers, we require the ongoing support of international organizations and, of course, Professor Wallgren. So once again, our appreciation from Ecuador, and we remain at your disposal to entertain your questions. Julio? Well,
Julio.
thank you so very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your presentation. Well, the advancements that Ecuador as well as Colombia have put on the table demonstrate that it is possible to advance in very specific topics on these administrative registries. statistics registries. These advancements help identify existing challenges and finding ways to solve them. Obviously, there is a great deal to do still, but these specific experiences in the region are a point of departure, a very important point to begin, and DINEC and DANE will know how to share all this information with other Caribbean and Latin American statistics office. We've received many questions. Most of them have been already answered by the system. We thank you for presenting these questions. This is a topic that can generate many long conversations. We expect to continue organizing events of this sort, but obviously it is time to finish this session, and to do so, I would like to express appreciation to Britt and Anders for your availability today. Thank you for being here. And as Camilo and Julio already said, the work in the last years and the support that you've given to the region, traveling multiple times to many countries, more than 10 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Here I will try to say tack så mycket. In Swedish, thank you so much. Thank you, Susana, Camilo, and Julio, for your presentations, and special thanks to our audience. Thank you for connecting. We had more than 170 participants online. Anybody saying that statistics are boring and dry, you're not that involved as we are. This interest shows of this great number of people on a Friday, 1 week just before Christmas. Great interest in the chat. I put the links with the presentations and the video of the event. We expect to make them available in January once we begin 2023. So without further ado, I hope that this virtual seminar, this webinar has been of your liking and that you accompany us in the next event. Till next time, happy holidays and thank you all for participating.
Muchas gracias a todos. Un fuerte abrazo de Ecuador. Felices fiestas.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, everybody. Have a very happy day. See you next time.